We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
As 2023 draws to a close, we're here to examine the big cases of the year that shocked the establishment, that rocked DC, and generally entertained both Scott D. Cosenza, host of the Excellent Uprising podcast and Liberty Nation's Legal Affairs editor, and myself in the most entertaining ways. Scott D. Cosenza, thanks for being here.
Cheers, Mark. Always a pleasure.
So, Scott, I believe you prepared a few stories that you think are in your professional opinion as a constitutional attorney, believe are the top legal issue stories of the year to date.
My list is defensible in any company, Mark, and I think any keen observer of the court would at least agree with 4 out of 5.
Okay. So already Scott's batting an 80% rather than 100%, but we'll let that slide for now. So
Hall of Fame is 300 in baseball, Mark. So,
which is greater than 80? Presumably, in terms of whole
80
numbers?
80 is 800. All right, I'm not going to confuse
80 is 800, that's how that works.
I'm not going to confuse you with American That's for Tim Donner to do. I will stick with
whose presence you can enjoy on the Excellent Uprising podcast. Please do check it out where all good podcasts are provided, or on the pages of libertynation.com, which is an excellent place to be. So let's start with the big one, Scott. In your opinion, what is the biggest case for 2023?
Well, Students for Fair Admission versus Harvard and the University of North Carolina. I think you'd be hard pressed to.
That's the affirmative action shutdown, right?
That is the case that basically said affirmative action or racial discrimination for some people against others, even if those people have been put upon historically by laws, including African Americans, is not okay. And we've already seen, Mark. So there's been 2 reactions to that case, I think both of which were predictable. One is that the colleges and universities, the ones that are the most virulent discriminators, the ones who cannot abide judging a person just on the basis of their achievement, the Harvards and the Yales, for instance, they're doing everything they can to, I was going to say work around the ruling. Like, what's the right way to phrase it? You don't want to say not comply, because they would argue that they are trying to comply with the ruling.
Complying in the strictest possible, narrowest path which they can, and still increasing their minority numbers.
And for a cynic who may doubt their veracity, they may say that what they're doing is they're trying to game the system. But what I think happens generally in these cases is when a big change comes in, and we've seen this with guns cases, what happens is the reaction is to try to maintain all the bite of the law that was stricken down without some of the language that the court specifies as illegal. And yet what happens over time is the court whittles away those attempts to claw onto typically the law that was stricken
in subsequent
down.
challenges, you mean?
Indeed. And I think that's what's going to happen for students for fair admission. And the other thing that's happened is, and this I think is the huge benefit to this decision across society, is many organizations that kind of take their guidelines from these what's allowed and what's legal and supported by the court have now decided to pare back and not engage in racial discrimination. So, for instance, scholarships that law firms offered, for instance, to only students of color, well, they're now opened up to all students, regardless of their race or origin.
At least on the surface.
Well, for law firms especially, it's kind of funny because
they do have lawyers on staff that could argue their case if it's a very narrowly tailored interpretation of the law.
I was going to go in a different direction than you did, Mark. I was going to say that if the lawyers see that there is a clear liability based on the newly established precedent, they're actually likely to be some of the first people to say, hey, you know what? Let's cover our butts over here and maybe not have to pay a giant
It's funny that we've gone the 2 separate directions on that, because it seems to me, and obviously I'm not involved in the jurisprudence, the legal world, thankfully, of any country, but it seems to me that
not all heroes wear capes.
Absolutely. So it seems to me that for some companies, and obviously a law firm is a company, the social credit that they earn is worth more than running afoul of any laws that they could quite articulately defend against. And they could see it as this is more of a boost for us to be seen to be flaunting, at least in outside of the courts, to be seen to be flaunting this kind of interpretation, because this shows that we're, behind the message, the progressive message, and that can bring them a lot of cash, a lot of notoriety, and a lot of new clients who are involved in the progressive sort of woke arena of lawfare.
I would say,
or am I just a cynic?
I think that I don't think that I think you're insufficiently cynical once again, Mark. What
the only person who says this about me.
You're overvaluing the market benefit of participation in the various discriminatory practices. I think that's just de rigueur for that crowd. It's not, it's not the thing that differentiates them in the marketplace. It's just like all good people, if you would, that's what they do. But the fees, the legal fees, judgments and penalties they may or would have to pay out will really affect the bottom line. And beach houses and BMWs don't pay for themselves, Mark. So
absolutely,
I think that's
multi-$1,000 donations to Democrats also don't pay for themselves. Or to Republicans, for that matter, depending on which side.
They're happy to buy whoever's gonna, they don't care who paints their house, just as long as they get the color right,
Absolutely right. Now, so that's your big one for the year. I think I got to agree with you that that was also my thinking was that was the big case of the year, because it's really upending everything that has been in place since I was a kid. Certainly, the idea that affirmative action is the rule of the land and is a net positive to society and to the people. Whereas we've talked about this before on the show, that it's not necessarily a benefit to the people who are recipients of affirmative action, because they do oftentimes have. I remember somebody was saying this around Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, that she would forever have an asterisk next to her name for being a hire, which I think is quite unfair based on her career and her accomplishments. But that is often the case with people who get their places through affirmative action. So I think it's a Christmas miracle that people will now be judged on their merits and their character.
By the way, she's not the only one. We're recording this the same week that former Associate Justice Sandra Day O'Connor lies in state in the courts in the courthouse, and she too. Reagan said that he would choose a woman to be a Supreme Court justice. So I think that another asterisk that she wasn't chosen because she was the best choice for the court. But in truth, all of them have asterisks in one way or another, meaning
they're all
it's
political
a political decision. This is not about some sort of merit where legal scholars can say, no, the acumen and the breadth and depth of knowledge and the tone and the measure of their gravitas and humanity. It's a political decision. So, but also it seems like we can't have a society where it's cool to discriminate against some people on the basis of their race and not others. It either should be okay for universities, for instance, or employers to say racial discrimination is legal within our laws, or that it's not, but that it is legal for some and not others, and favored races and disfavored depending on the winds of politics. That seems to be the worst of all worlds.
Well, Scott, there was once a time in America where such a thing was perfectly legal and within the law. And I thought we'd moved on from that, but apparently not is the case. Yeah. Okay, Scott, we are going to be back with you, figuring out the best of the rest after this short break. Listeners, don't go anywhere. Thanks very much.
We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Don't get caught up in the media madness. Join our movement for free thinking and free speech at libertynation.com. Publishing news and analysis 24/7 with original articles by our team of authors who tell it like it is. Join us each week for online TV shows, The Uprising Podcast, and Liberty Nation Radio. We believe in free thinking and free speech.
We are LibertyNation.com.